Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. The topic for today's webinar is Distributed Energy Storage for Health and Resilience. This webinar is being presented by the DOE-OE Energy Storage Technology Advancement Partnership, also known as STAP. STAP is a collaboration between the U.S. Department of Energy Office of Electricity, Sandia National Laboratories, and the Clean Energy States Alliance, also known as CESA. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few very quick webinar logistics. If you'd like to minimize your webinar console so that you can view the presentation full screen, you can click on the orange arrow that you see circled here. You can also click on that orange arrow to expand your webinar console. And one thing that you might like to do with your webinar console is to submit your questions and your comments. We will be saving about 15 minutes or more at the end of our presentation for Q&A with the audience, and we love to get to questions, so type them in as you think of them. A final note, this webinar is being recorded, and we'll send you an email with a copy of the webinar slides and the recording and maybe some other materials related to the webinar either today or tomorrow. And those materials will also be posted on CESA's website at cesa.org/webinars. So with that, I am happy to pass it over now to my colleague, Todd Olinsky-Paul. Todd is a Senior Project Director here at the Clean Energy States Alliance, and he will get us started.
Thanks, Samantha. Welcome to the webinar, everyone. This is, of course, part of our STAP series of webinars, and I'll explain what that is in a moment and introduce the speakers. First of all, I just want to give everyone a little bit of background on CESA, the Clean Energy States Alliance. We're located in Vermont. We are essentially a membership organization for state energy agencies across the country. You can see many of the members represented on the slide here. We help them with their programs and policy development and share information sharing between and among the states, and also from outside experts such as the national laboratories, US DOE, university researchers, and so forth. Next slide, please. Among the other things that we do, we have this long-term, long-running project called STAP, which is the Energy Storage Technology Advancement Partnership, which we conduct under contract to Sandia National Laboratories and with funding from US DOE, Office of Electricity. And we have Dr. Gyuk from DOE-OE here with us today. He's going to make some introductory remarks. STAP essentially exists to facilitate partnerships between DOE, Office of Electricity, Sandia, and other national laboratories and states. The primary object is to help the states, Sandia and DOE, come together and form partnerships to develop and build energy storage demonstration projects. And these are projects all over the country. You can see some of them represented on the map here. They often demonstrate not necessarily a new technology, although that's certainly part of it, but also new applications for energy storage, new business models, and energy storage partnering and working together with different other technologies such as not just solar and wind, but things like run-of-river hydro. So there's a lot of interesting projects, and if you go to our website and look up STAP, you can get some information on those. We also disseminate information through webinars such as this one, as well as through conference presentations, case studies, and so forth. And we provide direct support to state energy agency officials, policymakers, and regulators in their endeavors, which is to say we do a lot of work to advance energy storage policy and program development at the state level. Next slide, please. So before I continue, I want to thank Dr. Imre Gyuk, the Director of Energy Storage Research at U.S. Department of Energy, Office of Electricity. As I said, he's here today to make some introductory remarks. Also, I would like to thank Dan Borneo, who has been longtime Sandia program lead and engineering project lead. He is now in the process of retiring. We featured and worked with Dan over, well, we featured him on many of these webinars, and we've worked with him for 10 years. And we are sad to see him retiring and wish him the best in his future endeavors. And also want to thank Waylon Clark at Sandia, who is the new Energy Storage Demonstration Program team lead. He's not here with us today, but we'll have him on future webinars. Next slide, please. Speakers for today, Dr. Gyuk will start us off. We will then have Marriele Mango from Clean Energy Group, our sister organization. Clean Energy Group and CISA share a lot of the same resources and people, including myself, who will talk about CEG's Technical Assistance Fund. We will then hear from Jamie Swezey and Will Heegaard of the Footprint Project, and then from Broderick, Bagert, and Asia Ognibene from Together New Orleans. And these are two organizations that have really put this concept of mobile storage and solar and storage for resilience into practice. Next slide, please. I wanted to, before we turn it over to Dr. Gyuk, just say that this is a concept that we've been sort of thinking about for a long time. A lot of people have been thinking about it for a long time. We spend a lot of time and resources and energy thinking about how to make communities more resilient, including by installing microgrids and solar and storage at critical facilities. But it's sort of obvious that to date, that's only been done in a very small portion of the communities out there. And so there's a lot of need for a mobile solution that brings the resilience to the community in need when it's needed, rather than relying on prior work to have made that community resilient. They're both excellent types of solutions, but they're different. And so we're really focusing today on the mobile solutions. And hopefully we'll have more to say about this as time goes on and more projects are initiated and pilot projects are underway.
You may have frozen, Todd. I'm not sure if that happened for anyone else. Todd, are you still there? I think Todd might be having some technical challenges. I know the weather's rough, so it might be worthwhile just passing it over to Dr. Gyuk to start his opening remarks, if that would be okay.
Well, hello, I'm Imre Gyuk, and I direct the energy storage program at the Department of Energy, Office of Electricity. Transmission moves energy through space. Energy storage moves energy through time. 20 years ago, some of us realized this, but it's taken all this time to drive home the truth that we cannot reach a decarbonized grid without storage. And now we're building gigafactories, constructing storage facilities with hundreds of megawatts, and worrying about the supply chain of critical materials. But what if we want to bring energy through both space and time in a different way by transporting the batteries themselves? Is there a use case for this? Indeed, there may be a considerable application for doing this. There are many cases where transportable energy may be needed. Think of advanced military outposts. A mobile battery with attached photovoltaics is a much better solution than diesel generators in a constant need for trucking and fuel. And the same solution works for disaster areas. We all know that disasters have increased rapidly in recent years. And of course, it's due to global warming. Floods and droughts, hurricanes and blizzards, not to mention wildfires. They're all accompanied by outages. You need energy, and you need it fast. Mobile energy is the solution. During such outages, we will need a whole spectrum of solutions, from whole neighborhoods to facilities such as hospitals and nursing homes to individual homes. There are many people who need electricity for respirators and other medical equipment. There are also older populations who are more vulnerable to heat stroke and less able to reach regional facilities. We have started to explore underserved communities through our energy storage for social equity program. But even that will not reach down to individuals. Today's webinar will explore some potential solutions for delivering mobile energy in situations where the electric grid fails and energy is of vital importance. We want to make sure that everyone has electricity at all times. It's a tall order. So we will now go to the next speaker.
Hi everyone, I'm Marriele. I'm a project director with Clean Energy Group, and I'm just going to take some time today to set up the premise for what we'll be talking about before I hand it over to Asia, Broderick, Jamie, and Will to really discuss their on-the-ground efforts. And that's a focus on what Dr. Gyuk got to in his opening remarks related to resilience for medically vulnerable populations. So to start, the project I work on is the Resilient Power Project through Clean Energy Group. And the emphasis there is really equitable advancement, public health, to build awareness, and to amplify community voices. So the focus of that initiative is to really advance solar and storage resources in underserved, marginalized, vulnerable communities, and to do so by supporting the organizations that are doing the work on the ground to make that a reality, as well as supporting policy, program development, things like that, that really are what progress solar and storage forward. A lot of what I'll be touching on today is based on a report that Clean Energy Group released in 2019, Home Healthcare in the Dark, Why Climate, Wildfires, and Other Emerging Risks Call for Resilient Energy Storage Solutions to Protect Medically Vulnerable Households from Power Outages. This was really CEG's first entree into looking at the intersection between health, equity, and energy security, and how all of these things interact with each other, how important it is, and how resilience, i.e. solar and battery storage, can support public health in the event of a power outage for the most vulnerable populations. I highlighted here a quote that we use throughout the report, as well as in presentations, from a Sierra Club environmental justice organizer after Hurricane Marriele. She said, hundreds of people died simply because they couldn't keep their insulin refrigerated or their oxygen machines running. We need solar and storage so we can protect health and safety through the next hurricane with distributed, reliable energy infrastructure. So just to start a little bit of background on health, equity, and energy security, at least 2.5 million people rely on electricity-dependent medical equipment in the US. That includes oxygen concentrators, electric wheelchairs, at-home dialysis machines. The majority of these folks, although not all of them, are folks over the age of 65 who are seniors, where we've seen the trends in the US, really more and more people are opting to age in place rather than in an institution such as a nursing home. That's great, there's a ton of benefits to that, but there are some energy security risks. So with home healthcare growth trends expected to continue and more people to age in place, people are opting to receive care at home, and that's expected to double by 2060. The home healthcare industry is really exploding, which means more people are going to be relying on electricity-dependent medical equipment. And that's not just typically one thing. Oftentimes there's chronic illness involved. Folks who are relying on an oxygen concentrator may also need refrigeration for insulin, may also need air conditioning for cooling. So it's quite the system to have folks aging in place. Again, while there's a lot of benefits to receiving medical care at home, there are risks. So hospitals and other facilities, you're seeing this quite a bit with nursing homes across the country, are increasingly required to have emergency generator power on hand in the event of a power outage, so that they can at least do emergency evacuation, provide a lifeline to the folks, the residences at their facility. The same backup power requirements don't apply to the home healthcare sector. So as we're encouraging more and more folks to age in place and to receive the medical care at home, the policy really hasn't caught up to how do we ensure that they're staying safe in the event of a power outage, more and more of which are happening each year due to climate change, severe weather, grid instability issues, which I'm sure our partners will talk about quite a bit as it relates to New Orleans. And these energy security concerns are really being brought to the forefront of public safety power. And what does it mean to go without power for days or longer, for hours? It could be a medical emergency for electricity-dependent residents to not have power for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And not everyone has access to just be able to go to a neighbor or find that reliable backup power. And oftentimes they'll wait until there's a medical emergency. So we've highlighted here that in the 2003 blackout in the Northeast, respiratory device failure accounted for 65 emergency department visits and 37 hospitalizations over a 2-day period. And that was from like 2 hospitals that reported. So these aren't small figures. Just reading that again, with the public safety power shutoffs happening in California, huge amount of folks are ending up in the ER because they do not have reliable backup power to charge electricity-dependent medical devices or store refrigeration. And in California, that resulted in a 30% increase in ER patients for one hospital. And not to mention that, there were generator reliability issues with the diesel generator that the hospital had. So they then had to ship off patients to a hospital even further away. And these implications just keep domino effect over and over again. So if we can have more people being able to shelter in place at their home or in their community, not only is it better for them and their mental health, it's better for their physical health as well as for the larger public health network. So that brings us to our presentation today. We will be focusing on how resilient power, solar paired with battery storage, can support reliable backup power through an outage. A lot of the focus today will be on an emergency scenario. So in the event of a power outage, how do we get reliable power to folks? But I like to highlight there are also economic benefits during regular grid operations of solar and storage systems in people's homes or in critical facilities that traditional generators do not provide. And you also don't have the climate, air quality, and reliability issues that come from things like traditional diesel generators. So we're going to hear a lot about portable solar and storage today, and I will let the folks that know more about it talk about that. But just to touch on some of the differences of what we're looking at when we're considering resilience for public health, it is not one size fits all. So you're going to need portable solar and storage, which is mobile solar and storage. That footprint project especially is an expertise on, and we'll talk about to actually make sure that solar and storage is out in the field. We'll have stationary systems that are installed in a facility and serve only that facility. Typically at CEG and the partners we're having on this call today, that focuses in critical community facilities, right? So like food pantries, institutions of faith, resilience hubs, health clinics, the places that folks actually will use in the event of a power outage because they're their existing community institutions. And then finally, residential. It's having those in-home systems for folks who can't go anywhere in the event of a power outage and really need access right then and there. That could look like a whole home system that supports a single family home, or it could be maybe a resilience hub within an affordable housing unit where folks can go down and access things too. So we're gonna be focusing again mostly on the portable because I think that it's a really unique conversation about what Together New Orleans and Footprint Project has already done to support folks in the immediately following a power outage in their communities through this battery network, which is really exciting. But there are a bunch of other resources on our website if you're interested in learning more about stationary equipment as well. So I'd be remiss if I did not plug Clean Energy Group's Technical Assistance Fund, which has supported our partners throughout the country to date. It supports the development of clean energy projects, solar and storage projects, in marginalized and underserved communities. Typically, this is a report. It basically is a facility-specific report on how solar and storage can support that facility. What would be the cost, the incentives, how much backup power can you expect? We've supported Footprint in the past with their innovative trailer model with portable solar and storage. Grants are about $8,500 per facility or per project, and we really prioritize those that serve BIPOC, medically vulnerable, marginalized communities. It's a very easy program, and there's a low barrier to entry, so I encourage anyone who's interested to reach out. These are some of the projects that we've supported across the country to date. A lot of them are in critical facilities, but we're working with folks in Navajo Nation on off-grid housing. We're working with Footprint projects in Together New Orleans on portable. This is really meant to cover any of the innovative projects trying to bring solar and storage to their community. So with that, I will pass it off to our partners to discuss. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me.
Thanks, Marielle. Yeah, thank you so much for having us here today. This is super exciting. Clean Energy Group, I will also give y'all a shout out because you have been with us since the beginning and funded one of our first projects. So thank you again. We are Footprint Project. I am Jamie Swezey. I'm the program director here. We are a small nonprofit organization. We started in Minnesota, where both Will and I are from, and we are now based in New Orleans. Our mission is to build back greener after disasters by providing cleaner energy to communities in crisis. Oops. Oh, shoot. So I think this kind of goes without being said, but it's never a bad thing to have more data. Disasters are happening more frequently than ever. I think everyone in the United States and across the world really is feeling this more acutely than ever. And then the way that we respond to them is, of course, with what gas and diesel generators, which on top of being bad for the environment, are also very bad for health and safety. One of the things that we think about all the time at Footprint Project is the fact that right here, this headline, after Hurricane Laura, the carbon monoxide poisoning killed more people than the actual hurricane itself. After anyone that's been in Puerto Rico or even right here in New Orleans, if you walk around the streets and you hear that terrible hum of generators, you often see also how close, folks are putting them to their house. It is, not only is it an environmental pollution problem, it's also a health and safety problem. So hopefully that gives y'all a little bit of context into the problem that we at Footprint Project are working on. And our goal is really to close that negative feedback loop of responding to disasters that are increasingly exacerbated by climate change with fossil fuels themselves. So we're excited to talk about a few of the solutions that we have been trying out since 2018. And we're excited to share those with y'all. So a few of our programs, we have 3 sort of core programs. The first one that we'll probably be talking about the most today is disaster response. So we manage and deploy our fleet of mobile solar generators that we use to displace or offset the use of traditional gas and fossil fuel generators in the immediate aftermath of disasters. And then in between disasters, we work with communities and first responders to assemble new solar generators because I think the best way for folks to learn about new resilient infrastructure and how to operate, deploy, and maintain those assets is to build them together. And then lastly, we have our Upcycle Energy program, which at this point is sort of less of a program and more something that we integrate into all of the work that we do. So we reuse second life solar components such as solar panels, inverters that would otherwise be headed for a landfill and integrate them into all of the systems that we are building either with communities or for our own fleet. Just to give you some background on our impact, since 2018, we have deployed to over 20 disaster missions. Sorry, I got a little bit of a lag here. And then to give you some context, I love talking to folks like this about some of these numbers here. 200 kilowatts of mobile solar, about 600 kilowatts of storage. There we go, sorry about that. And just to give you kind of a sense of the scale that we're working at, I think some of the folks on this call probably deploy 200 kilowatts of solar before breakfast. So I just like to kind of show the number at which Footprint Project is working. And then here are just some of the disasters where we've been. Hurricane Ida was our biggest disaster response to date. We were also at the Kentucky tornadoes in 2021, the Puerto Rico earthquakes, Tennessee tornadoes. We deployed to a COVID-19 clinic in Matamoros, Mexico at an asylum seeker encampment. And then we also have a presence out in California and for wildfires. We work mostly in the domestic US and Puerto Rico, but we have done some sort of remote disaster consulting for Ukraine and the earthquakes in Turkey. So first, I just kind of wanted to give an overview of what we're talking about when we say a solar generator. Couple of things is, I think, it's sort of a nascent technology. So defining what we mean when we say what is a solar generator, and then also especially today when y'all are going to be hearing from Together New Orleans, and a lot of stuff that they're doing is sort of stationary and grid tied. The vast majority of what we do is mobile solar and storage that is off grid and is replacing, the 2 to 10 kilowatt portable gas or diesel generator. So we define a solar generator as a pre-wired set of electrical components that collect energy from the sun. We like to use the analogy of that is the gasoline. They store the energy in batteries, what is the tank, and then they convert that energy for usable power or the engine. So I just wanted to run through a couple or 3 examples, kind of a small system, a medium system, and a large system to give you an example of what we're doing. So this is what a small portable system looks like. The storage here usually ranges anywhere from 2 to 5 kilowatt hours, and then usually around a 2 kilowatt output. So this example is from a site that we supported after Hurricane Ida. It was a community group in the United Home and Nation that was providing a service to mostly elders in the community who needed to access their FEMA paperwork and help get that filled out. So we were charging cell phones, using it as just a cell phone charging station, but then also running laptops, Wi-Fi, and that is a speaker that is not a washer and dryer. We'll get to that later. That's kind of it gives you an idea of what during the day when the sun's out, the capacity, and then at night, of course, the loads need to be a little smaller. And for example, I kind of wanted to put a couple things in here because I know we're talking about health today. So CPAP machine or a nebulizer, as well as also being able to charge phones and a couple of LED lights at night. So the second example we have here is a medium system. It's about double the size of the small system, and usually our medium systems are a trailer, so solar panels on the top, and then the electrical components and batteries inside of the trailer. Again, about double the size of the of the last one you saw. And this one was at a deployed in, I believe it was 2020, at the tornadoes in Nashville and Chattanooga, Tennessee. This was at an aid station that was providing a charging station and also refrigeration. So here's another example of what we had going here. Coffee maker. Sometimes that's a key, you know, health and safety asset. But as you can see, even though, you know, it's double the size of the last one, anything that requires heat, you're going to have a lot less that you're going to be able to run, because that always is kind of an energy hog. But we did have also a few people that were coming to charge, you know, phones, and then electric mobility devices, as well as refrigeration. And then same thing here, just giving an idea of what overnight that same system can do. And then lastly, a large system. So this was also after Hurricane Ida. This was down in Homa, outside of the American Legion. They were running a volunteer camp that was there for about 4 or 5 months, I believe. That was housing some nurses that were using this as kind of a base from which they would go during the day, and then they would sleep here at night. And then there was a community kitchen as well. And so this was an example of a large system that is actually 2 Tesla Powerwalls on a pallet. I believe there were 2 of those, so it was 4 total. And then we set up 2 5-kilowatt arrays for 10 kilowatts of solar, and the output was about 7 kilowatts. And what they were running was, again, a community kitchen, and then kind of stuff for volunteers. So coffee, always essential. This actually is a washer and dryer. They weren't running the dryer because, again, heat is a little bit too much to run reliably during the day or even at night. And then refrigeration, fans, and an air conditioner. And then again, just at night here, you can see some of the other things that folks need to run to keep the camp operational for those few months. And now I'm going to hand it off to Will, and he's going to talk a little bit about some of our new initiatives that we've been working on over the past year or so that are kind of directly related to this health and accessibility theme that we're talking about today. So take it off.
Thanks, Jamie. Can you hear me okay? This is good. Yep. Cool. I'm going to go quick because I know we have a lot of stuff to discuss, and I want to make sure there's plenty of time for questions. So just some brief initiatives that we're working on this year, and we're especially excited to be on this call with Together New Orleans, who's really the kind of a lynch point in the community, and we're just thrilled to be connected to them. We're exploring how beehive microgrids could be integrated into permanent microgrid systems. So when we talk about a beehive, we're thinking about a number of mobile solar battery trailers that could be connected to a standard stationary microgrid hive and then be physically deployable or dispatchable to set up satellite resilience hubs in kind of downrange, farther afield, where the grid's going to take longer to get back up after disaster. We're actually in the process of working through the pilot or kind of assistant technical review right now, thanks to another plug for Clean Energy Group and their technical assistance fund. They were the ones that allowed us to pay an awesome architect to render what it would look like to have a number of mobile solar bees kind of stationed at the Net2 charter school in Gentilly, feeding back to the hive when they're kind of parked. So this is really exciting. I think for us, it kind of integrates a lot of questions that we've been asking ourselves about how can we actually get this equipment to the places that are farther afield from the hubs themselves, because we know due to a lot of accessibility issues and what Marriele was talking about earlier, there's just, you know, a lot. If we set up power at a hub, there are always going to be people that can't access the hub, and that means we're not doing our job appropriately and we're not meeting the needs of the community at large. So another fun rendering of how these things could be deployed during outage to neighborhood kind of pop-up resiliency sites. I think the larger question, kind of second question along this is, all right, let's say we have a beehive ready to go, and then the lights go out after a large hurricane. We can run extension cords through the windows at those satellite points where we're bringing the bees to. But if specific spots farther afield, more in the satellite network of areas that need power, were pre-outfitted with transfer switches, we wouldn't have to run extension cords through the window to plug into that insulin fridge or office space or air conditioner, whatever. We could just plug right into the building. And this was the first time we did this was in California with one of our trailers in fall of 2020, I think, during a PSPS event. I think this is kind of brings together a lot of the work that we've been doing in preparing ahead of time to activate mobile energy storage solutions with community partners like Together New Orleans. This photo, this was kind of a real key moment where we saw kind of a hub and spoke model really come together, thanks to the close partnership we've been working on with Brod and the Together team. This was after the second Arabi tornado in November, where we deployed a solar trailer B, and you can see that it's the black trailer in the back left corner there. And that was filled with a number of portable, and I mean portable, like cell phone charger batteries that Together New Orleans helped procure after the first Arabi tornado last March. So we had a chance to really build off of some of the work we had been doing together in the aftermath of a previous response and pilot a battery library in which we deployed a B that had a bunch of really handheld level battery systems, and then folks could come check out a battery and return it to the little B to charge for a couple when they ran out of juice. Now we could imagine using larger handheld batteries with real kind of 120 volt AC plugs that could charge into CPAP or home health devices like the little black box with the orange clips on the table at the bottom of the image. That is a kind of suitcase sized battery, and we're exploring how we could deploy those to folks with home health or specific accessibility needs for a kind of a little beefier version of this battery library concept. And I know Todd, the Together New Orleans team is going to talk about that later. I think it all comes back to getting the power where people who would otherwise be left in their home in their dark, or otherwise have to call 911 and go to the ER, or otherwise be left alone to perish, and which has actually happened. And I think we need to be really honest about the reality of this work. It's about getting the energy to the people who need it most. And if all the tech, we can talk about kilowatt hours, we can talk about all this cool fancy gadgets and gizmos that go into it, but if we don't stay focused on getting the electrons to people that would make or save their life, then none of the other things matter. So I think it'll just we need to stay focused on who we're here to serve, why we're doing the work we're doing, and all these other stuff is kind of means to that end. And I mean, just to sum up our kind of general vision, this is a long road. We're not going to do this alone. We are thrilled to have grounded community partners like the Together New Orleans team to tell us where to go, who needs what, where should we set up a B, where should we drop a battery library. When the power goes out, we can't do this work without people that know the communities, and that's for what makes us so really honored to kind of share this just figure it out with a group like Together. So with that, yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll pass it off.
All right. My name is Broderick Bagert. I am an organizer, or you can't see me yet, can you? Sorry about that. I'm an organizer with Together New Orleans and Together Louisiana. and Asia and I are going to present. And in the spirit of, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Let me try to give a 1-minute overview. After Hurricane Ida, which did not hit New Orleans, but devastated New Orleans because it knocked out the transition system. We had max winds of 55 miles an hour, but the power went out. And as Asia will describe, it was a devastating event that killed a lot of people. And it was the umpteenth time that it happened. We worked to begin building a network of solar and storage resilience hubs, and a strategy that we called Community Lighthouse. The vision of that is 1 in every neighborhood, 86 across New Orleans, 300 across the state. A pilot phase is underway. As we dug in and really tried to grapple with the challenge of why people die, when they die, how they die, you start to realize every neighborhood is actually not enough. That we need to have every neighborhood as a deployment center for smaller deployable batteries that range on people's need, from people who need a cell phone charging device to stay in communications to people who need more sophisticated, heavier, more expensive equipment. And as the folks in the Footprint Project describe, I mean, we have been figuring this out together, and fortunately or not, have a lot of opportunities to do that. But a vision is starting to emerge of solar and storage neighborhood level resilience hubs that are not just kind of shelters or places where people come, but are deployment centers and places where people and deployable batteries along with other essential goods and services get distributed from. So we're going to share a little bit more about that vision and want to be really frank with you that the topic of this seminar is right on the cutting edge of where we're at. We kind of started realizing the importance of deployable around cell phone batteries last year, and now are realizing it has to be much more central. And so it's coming at a timely way, and hopefully this will be an invitation for all of you who know a lot more about this than we do to help us think about how the incredible ideas you have go and start existing in neighborhoods, which is our strength. I should say just one more word about who we are. Together New Orleans is an organization made up of 54 religious congregations, civic organizations, neighborhood organizations. We are not energy experts, at least we didn't start out that way. We've become more knowledgeable because we have to, in order to know enough to put in place a strategy that's going to protect people and show the potential of the technologies that exist. So with that, I'll let Asia describe a little bit more about kind of our overall strategy and how we have been sort of expanding that into the deployable space. Are you seeing my screen now?
Yep, we're seeing it. I think you'll need to put it into presentation mode.
Okay, should be heading there.
Perfect.
Great. Thanks, Rod. I'm Asia Ognibene. I'm a project organizer with Together New Orleans, specifically around the Community Lighthouse Project, taking point on what disaster response looks like as a part of this project. So as Rod kind of gave an overview of, we built this project out of the natural disasters. So what we know is that in the Gulf Coast area, long duration power outages are the leading cause of death. After Hurricane Laura, 31 people died, 19 of them were from the power outage. In Texas, in February 2021, Winter Storm Uri, 246 of those deaths were from long duration power outages. And then in August of that same year, 36 of the deaths from Hurricane Ida, 30 of them were from power outages. So this Community Lighthouse vision kind of became because of Hurricane Ida. our leaders and pastors from all of our different organizations and congregations got together because they were angry. They were furious. How many times are we going to go through a disaster and the power goes out and then we're just left helpless? There was a leader, one of our pastors from one of our churches, whose council member called him and said, hey, can you set up a cooling station at your church? The power's been out for a while now. You know, people really need that relief. And he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it because his church had no power and he was literally left powerless. So instead of just sitting there and griping and, you know, stewing in their own anger, our leaders said, what can we do? It's not about what are they going to do anymore. It's about what are we going to do? So that became what the Community Lighthouse vision is community-based resilience hubs so that folks after long duration power outages have access to cooling centers and just a little spot to get some reprieve. So we have a video that we're going to show, and then Broderick's going to kind of explain the Lighthouse vision.
And if Asia, if audio doesn't work in the way I'm trying to do it, just make it known within about the first 10 seconds, okay?
Gotcha. No audio.
Will that work?
No.
All right, so in this lovely video we had that doesn't work in GoToWebinar, it describes this network, and I'm going to skip ahead a bit to kind of just show a little bit of that. The strategy is to build a network of solar and storage centers. Each one of them will build a team of people and have a specific area that they are responsible for. That group, the team, will canvass that area and identify people who are vulnerable, people who have power-dependent medical devices, who don't have transportation, who are elderly, who live alone, and we call that the 24-hour list. And then has a plan where that team reaches out to that 24-hour list, obviously within the first 24 hours, and then has relationships with other disaster response, hospitals, institutions, and I guess it's the kind of the cutting edge to figure out which people need which kind of batteries. This is a the vision is every single neighborhood. Right now, there's a pilot phase that has begun in New Orleans with 16 locations and then another 8 across the state. We expect to have those completed by the end of this year. 2 are underway, and the first one built just got its permission to operate 6 days ago. And so far today, it's a sunny day, is 99% self-sufficient. The energy produced defrays electricity bills, helps reduce carbon emissions, in addition to providing resilience when paired with battery. The objective of this is 250 to 300 across the state, so that nobody lives further than a 15-minute walk if you're in a city, or a 15-minute drive if you're in a rural area. This has raised about $7 million in mostly public funds, some philanthropic, and it's had a huge boom, if we hadn't said it so far, from the Energy Storage for Social Equity project, which way early in December of 2021, and the whole IDA was in basically September, and at the very end of August of 2021, selected this project as one of 14 across the country to have technical assistance for. And without that, I don't think we would be even kind of at the starting gate. So they've kind of taken us to the point now where it's ready for implementation. And, you know, I think initially the vision really was the neighborhood level and these as centers from which to deploy resources. But as we dug in, as Asia will explain, we started understanding, that the centers where you provide resources we started understanding how important it was going to be to also be able to deploy electricity. Asia?
Yeah, right. So as you can see here, this is kind of a graph of Hurricane Ida deaths. So Hurricane Ida hit August 29th. It wasn't really until about a week later on day 7 where most of those deaths occurred. So that means the longer the power is out, the more people are susceptible to illnesses and death. So what we learned from our research and seeing like when is a crucial time for cooling centers, we learned that a lot of these folks did have access to locations with generators. They did have a place where they can get cool during the day. It was when they went home at night. The weather doesn't get much cooler in the afternoon and nighttime in southern Louisiana. You don't stop needing oxygen from your oxygen tank at night. Cooling centers are not enough. Community Lighthouse needs to be more than just a place that people can sit in the AC. It needs to have resources that they can take home with them when they need it. So that's kind of where our vision for deployable batteries began. So in March of 2022, just months after the Lighthouse vision kind of became a thing, an EF3 tornado hit the Arabi area and parts of the lower 9th Ward of New Orleans, where one of our pilot lighthouse locations are, and created a scenario in which, we've got to act now on what this lighthouse vision is going to be. It just so happened it was the same day that we presented the lighthouse vision to New Orleans City Council. So that meant it was go time. So we set up at that pilot lighthouse location in the lower 9th Ward. We called the pastor to make sure everything was okay in his area. He said he's all good, power's on, he's going to be a lighthouse, let's do this. So we set up a staging grounds there and we're able to mobilize many volunteers and cast the vision for what disaster response and lighthouse looks like. So volunteers went door to door and canvassed to check on needs, make sure everyone was okay. And what we learned was that there is an overwhelming need for cell phone batteries. Communication is key when it comes to preventing deaths after disaster. The power is out, I can't charge my phone, I can't let my family know if I'm okay, what resources I need. So what we did was we partnered with Footprint Project using their solar generators. Together New Orleans went out and bought almost every portable cell phone battery, like kinds that look like this, in any open Walmart. We're able to get hundreds of them and partner with the Footprint Project and get those batteries charged and set up notification and communication, deploy those canvassers back out there to let people know we have cell phone batteries if you need to charge your cell phone. And that's what the portable battery exchange became. Folks were able to come and get a freshly charged cell phone battery, charge their cell phones, make sure everything was good, and then if they needed it, they could come back, return that dead battery and get a new one. And we were able to keep that going for a while because of that solar generator. We can go to the next slide. So this is what those deployable batteries look like. What we learned is that the portable battery exchange was simple, it was effective, and it was greatly appreciated. Folks returned our batteries. They, expressed extreme gratitude over the fact that they could call their family, they could get resources. They were a little bit more sustainable after this disaster. And then we were able to, as Jamie and Will said earlier, set this up again when another tornado hit the Arabi and Marriele areas of Louisiana, and same results were seen. Hundreds of people came out, got their cell phone batteries, and were able to get in communication with their families and have that sense of safety for a little longer.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna turn it over to Brod to kind of talk about what our vision is as far as batteries go.
Yeah, and I think we'll open it up to questions for us, and I think that'll lead into questions for anybody on the panel. But it's a very opportune and fortunate time to be trying to put a strategy like this in place. The infrastructure bill put significant resources potentially into strategies like this. A couple of those big buckets of money are dedicated for grid resilience, and the Inflation Reduction Act opened up the federal subsidies for solar and storage charged by solar to nonprofits for the first time, at least in a direct way. Our strategy has been to try to move as quickly as possible to get this network set up and pilots that are functioning, and in the meantime be working as broadly as we can to get different players on the same page. I bet this makes it sound like we've got it all figured. We don't have it all figured out, but at least in the same discussion to help us figure it out. The folks like the Flipgrid Project, who all these discoveries and realizations about the importance of deployable energy, like they were there from the very beginning, right? I mean, so people who've got that kind of on the ground experience. Also FEMA, our disaster response entities, trying to work to have significant funding entities like FEMA be open to solar and storage and deployable energy. And then really our state decision makers, who are principally the ones that decide what projects to apply for the infrastructure bill and others. One exciting development is that the state of Louisiana will be applying for a pretty significant grant under the GRIP program, which is one of the infrastructure bill, as a maximum of $500 million. They're going to apply for the maximum, and it is for resilience hubs. And at our urging, the proposal anyway is including a significant deployable battery component, and that allows us to go beyond cell phone batteries, which are nice, to the kind of brick size that can do a fan or a heater, to the small suitcase size that can do a CPAP machine or an oxygen machine and really save people's lives. So we are excited to continue to kind of really understand what this vision needs to be, and then put the constituency of people behind it to get the resources to really put it into place. So with that, I think we'll stop and see if there are any questions for us, and maybe turn it over to our moderators.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are we, does that conclude the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, let's get all of the presenters back on screen. If you could just turn your webcams on, because we have a lot of questions and really good ones, and we're going to get to a good number of them. So one question several people have asked is about electric vehicles, and I'm just going to try to summarize several different people's questions. Essentially, what people are saying is that electric vehicles are going to be increasingly in use. Essentially, are mobile power supplies on their own, or could be used as such. And is there a role for these electric vehicles in some kind of organized way to be able to deliver power, or for people to provide power to their own homes or businesses or communities? And that's open to whoever wants to take a shot at it.
Well, it's definitely one of the things that are being considered. At the moment, electric vehicles are not overly suited, and they're certainly not suited for providing electricity on a routine basis. But the thinking is that for emergency, electric vehicles would be very useful. The important thing, however, is to develop connection equipment that can do that. and that will not destroy the insurance on your car and whatnot. And of course, we have the additional problem that particularly in the less affluent communities, you're going to have fewer electric vehicles. You know, but those who have them should be able to use them in future.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to add to that I think there is so much potential. Electric vehicles are something that CEG is going to be diving deeper into as the prices come down for them. But I think it's worth reiterating that it's, if anything, we're working with more community-based organizations who are creating resilience hubs, who are concerned about maybe having like a parking lot or something being taken over in their community for EV charging when that doesn't really serve their community. And instead you have folks coming out to charge your vehicles in an underserved community and then leaving. And so it doesn't actually serve folks. So a lot of the community-based organizations that we're working with are looking at how can we have maybe 1 or 2 EV vehicles for our own institution that we can use in the event of a power outage, or nonprofits that provide emergency ambulatory support or food delivery. How can we kind of go electric and really have more of EV resources in the community with stations for charging that make sense, rather than jumping ahead to kind of like an EV revolution that hasn't really reached most underserved or marginalized communities.
I was going to say almost the same thing. It's like EV vehicles are a queen, but they have not yet claimed the throne. You know, I mean, I think we have 0 superchargers in the city of New Orleans, a really limited charging network. What we're trying to do is to create an infrastructure that will be able to accommodate that, you know, both through incorporating charging stations at the community lighthouses. So I think it's going to be really key some number of years from now, and that'll continue to happen with all the technologies that develop, right? I mean, 10 years ago, the idea of the power walls and other battery storage wouldn't have been an option. All of it, though, needs an infrastructure of people who know who needs the help and be able to get those resources to those people. So to kind of formalize and systematize how that happens and engage this much larger network of people who are parts of organizations that don't consider themselves disaster response organizations, but they end up being that anytime there's a disaster. You know, I think that's going to make it more possible to incorporate the incredible potential of electric vehicles as they expand.
Can I just add one thing about that? Because I'm so I mean, it's going to change the world in so many ways, but I think there's some tactical challenge. There's tactical benefits and tactical challenges from mobilizing. Hey, I have an EV in my garage. What's the plan for I want to help, right? From our side, we've been really looking at less about activating personal electric vehicles than activating future school buses. So we're in a conversation with Highland Fleets out of that's a school bus lending, lessor, and those are 250 kilowatt hour batteries that are largely parked during the summer. And when school is closed, they don't need them. So I think we're thinking about asset infrastructure from kind of in the public space might be a good first step than trying to say, hey, can I borrow my neighbor's EV to roll it to a resilience spoke site down to 20 miles away? And then one key note about that is an electric vehicle, unless it's a hybrid vehicle, it's a giant gas tank with no recharge, right? So we've been thinking about this very tactically for towing solar trailers, right? If we want to tow a 20 kilowatt hour battery 200 miles, how big of a battery would we need? And then how do we get the vehicle back? Because if the grid's down, we can get it there, and then and we saw this in the winter storm in New York. People got stranded in their EVs, right? The EV shuts down, it doesn't have a backup engine, and that is a health and safety risk itself. So I think we're going to see a lot of both the tactical advantages of more EV adoption on the road in a disaster, people driving their Tesla or their Prius or whatever to set up their own charging station and save people's their neighborhoods, you know, provide access points. But also, if everyone has EVs, the grid's down and they all drain, that is a huge tactical challenge for emergency managers. So I just think it's like a double-edged sword with all of it. Sorry,
We'll have to
So
think through it.
those are good
Yeah.
points. Yeah, good points. I think that in some ways points to the importance of pairing battery storage with solar when you're talking about a resilient solution, and that includes for transportation. So if your EV charging stations don't have solar panels, then they're not going to be much good once the grid is down. And same thing goes for your home charging in your garage. If you have a charger but no solar, you know, the EV is only going to last a short duration before it's depleted, if you're using it to power your home. Okay, next question. Some people are asking how these solutions compare with the traditional diesel genset in terms of how many cell phones or air conditioners or refrigerators you can keep up and running or keep charged. Yeah, of course that depends. The answer is always that depends. But taking your pilot projects in, you know, as the example, with whatever size of batteries and solar you're deploying, can you take a shot at answering that? And obviously, the supplies of liquid fuels are not always secure. In fact, they're often interrupted for resupply during the natural disasters. So I guess we're comparing a sort of one charged battery to one tank of diesel, something like that.
Yeah, I think on the practical, first I'd say an employee of Together New Orleans lost 3 of her family members to carbon monoxide poisoning in the wake of Hurricane Ida. It was the leading cause of death, carbon monoxide poisoning after Laura, and one of so it's that both creates a danger, and then it also creates a real fear for people who want resilience but don't want to use gas generators. Second, hurricanes knock out refineries, and supplies are extremely constrained. One of the fatalities not attributed to the storm was somebody shooting somebody else at a gas station because they cut in line. The third, though, is when you pair battery storage with enough capacity in terms of solar, there's really a limitless time frame, especially if you've got the capacity to manage usage, right? I mean, because it can recharge, and that's one thing liquid fuels cannot do, or fossil fuels is. So the design of the lighthouses is for them not to just have a couple days of storage that you use up, but in principle to have limitless capacity to operate, because there's enough photovoltaic to charge the battery and account for, you know, a normal level of cloudy days. We'll be testing that in the first hurricane season to see, okay, are our estimates right, even without a storm? But there's some real advantages. Plus, the batteries create a value proposition down the line when our utility rate structure gets sacked together and starts to incorporate the capacity to use storage. So we see just a lot more upsides to battery storage than typical generators.
I can add, I guess, that for us, what we've seen in the field, especially in the immediate aftermath of a disaster, when, you know, we're bringing a solar generator into a church where the pastor is going to be the new person in charge of their energy loads, and that it's less of a technology problem and more of a education and people problem. A lot of the times people are, the pastor's bringing in a 10 kW generator when all they need is to charge cell phones. And so everyone is used to kind of plugging in every single thing that they can and then refilling it with gas when it dies. And so what we're trying to do is kind of right size it a little bit better by asking them what they're actually plugging in, and then kind of telling them like, here's the right size for y'all that you should be using. But then oftentimes they'll plug in like 5 heaters also. So I guess it depends. I think the answer to the question there of how much can you plug in depends. And for us, what we've found, and this is why we're focusing a lot on our Build Power program, where we do a lot of training and education ahead of and in between the disasters with the folks who are, either the first responders or the pastor at the church that's going to be de facto in charge of their energy loads, kind of giving them an education about what a kilowatt hour is and what the difference between plugging in a cell phone and plugging in a heater is before the storm, so that once they have the solar generator that is either dropped off to them or that we've built together with them, it's going to be successful for them to use it.
And I just jump one more thing. It's just a different form of energy triage. And I think that's what Jamie is, we're really trying to, everyone's triaging their energy in a power outage. Some people are getting shot at the gas station. Some people are dying from carbon monoxide poisoning. Everyone is dealing, when the power's out, that everyone's triaging, right? It's just a different, what we're talking about is a different version of energy triage. And that takes a lot of upfront awareness and education. Technically, we are exploring ways of hybridizing portable generators. So we're working right now on a project where we're putting a 5 kilowatt-hour battery in a portable box with an auto start little gizmo that we could plug a generator, regular gas generator, into it that would trigger the generator to turn on when that little portable e-generator runs low. So it's kind of like building a tiny Prius, if that makes sense. And in that regard, we would be able to say, hey, pastor at the church, I know this is all fancy tech and this is new to you, and it's really, you have a million other things to worry about right now because the power's out, but just keep this generator full and keep it away from people. And then this battery is going to save you lots of fuel resupply, which is what this is what the military has been doing. This is what live events are doing. Hybridized storage really is I think the first step to this that's a lot easier to understand for folks that have never seen a solar panel or a battery up close and just want usable power, and don't really want to think more about it. So I think there's a lot of different ways to make this work. But saying we need a 10 kilowatt diesel generator, so what size battery do we need, doesn't work. You're gonna spend way too much money. It's also just, you're gonna run it down. If you're asking that question, it means we gotta Google a little bit more and do some energy math.
So I want to ask this. This is actually a question I've been thinking about. There's an awful lot of solar out there on roofs that does not have battery storage connected to it. Lots of schools, I think there was a solar foundation, I think, used to put out a map, I don't know if they still do, showing the locations of schools across the country that had solar panels, and it was just tons and tons of schools. And the vast majority, of course, don't have any storage and they're just net metering their solar. How is it possible to use the on-site solar, and is it possible to use the on-site solar in conjunction with a portable battery? In other words, could you drive up, unload the portable battery, hook it to the existing on-site solar, and have a rechargeable resource that doesn't require you to transport solar panels all over the place and then find a place to set them up on site. And just throwing that out there, I'm sure you've thought of it. And what's the technical issue there, or is there one?
It's not a technical issue. It's a permitting and it's getting, all you need is a DC transfer switch installed on that array and an AC transfer switch installed into the critical load panel. It's not hard. It's just the upfront solar installers are not installing a DC transfer switch with a whip to be able to let homeowners access the solar panels on their house and control that energy without it being net metered. Now, a lot of installers are using AC microinverters, so you'd need a similar AC transfer switch. This is just like electrician solving problems. It's not the real question is, are people going to ask for it up front? Who is going to do it? It's all a development thing. I mean, and I think it's really exciting that you brought that question up, because that it's a lot easier to get the storage is the most expensive part, right? It's a lot easier to get solar on homes and then add that kind of independence, those little gizmos that allow people to control it themselves later. It's just, I don't think there's been a lot of impetus to do it. I mean, it's like a $2,000 piece of equipment, but if you're not, that's the investment in resilience, and we're still all trying to figure out, what is it worth? What is resilience? What does it mean in the first place? And what is it worth? And some people might say, yeah, I want my installer to install this thing that would let me cut off my solar to island completely and then access those electrons from my panels. And then I want to buy a portable generator e-generator that I can charge off my roof or take camping or wherever. That's just it. There's not a lot of people requesting that yet. So I don't think installers are doing it. Sorry, that's my off the cuff answer.
That came, I mean, actually, after that conversation that Asia described after Ida, the first idea was we have 10,000 families, households in New Orleans that have solar. Let's get them all a battery, because that's what a lot of people were saying. We've got solar, how come we can't have electricity? And we ended up moving away from that, in part because it's a pretty hefty subsidy to private individuals who are not always the most needy, but also because if you thought of that at the front end when you're developing the systems and install the inverters that allow you to cut off from the grid, it makes perfect sense. And we need to do that going forward, to do it sort of at the institutional level first in each neighborhood, whether it's a school or a congregation or an organization, and then kind of show what's needed to do and encourage that for future private household sector development. Because the main thing is, it's not hard, but it's impossible if you haven't done it before the disaster strikes. It's not something like you can go do that electrician job, obviously. So I think it does have a lot of potential.
Okay, a couple of specific questions for organizations. This one is for Lighthouse. Where is the money primarily sourced from? Is it foundation money or FEMA or community development block grant money or BRIC? And is the program including any capital improvements of spaces to become a resilience hub?
Really good question. So the Greater New Orleans Foundation, which is the community foundation for kind of the New Orleans region, made $1 million kind of challenge grant that helped to kick off fundraising for this. The city of New Orleans has put in $2 million, half of that ARPA funds, half of it just another source. Our congressman put in an earmark, they don't call it that anymore, but that for $3.8 million, which was the largest earmark for a solar project in the country, we learned. Nancy Pelosi's district was second. So we said, Madam Speaker, well, we're proud of that, I guess I should say. That's all pretty kind of one-off, scrape it together. We've worked with the city to apply for about a $40 million FEMA grant. We have no idea whether that would succeed. And then I think the best opportunity is in the medium term is the infrastructure bill and the GRIP project. Here's the long-term funding source, because all these are pretty irregular. Incorporating funding in the utility rate structure for solar and storage resilience. And that is what Dr. Gyuk's team has helped us, among other things, figure out is we've now intervened in resilience dockets at the city level and at the State Public Service Commission. And at the city level are kind of in the final phase of making a case for why there being a resilience incentive for resilience hubs makes a lot of sense. It's extremely affordable. To build another 70 sites in New Orleans would require a subsidy of about $15 million. The utility is proposing projects to harden the grid of $1.6 billion, okay? So kind of how much of a good deal that is really brought home by the fact that half of it is going to be paid for by the federal government with the Inflation Reduction Act. So I think that's the one that we see as becoming a game-changing systemic funding source that could help to make it possible to put resilience hubs anywhere that suffers from long duration outages.
Okay, thank you. This next question is for Together New Orleans. Do you see a need for larger batteries to loan out? And how is it guaranteed that the devices would be returned?
We very much do. About 90% of the cell phone batteries were returned. When it's more expensive, do you get more back or fewer back? I don't know. I think, but go ahead, Andrew.
No, yeah, we didn't really have an issue with the cell phone batteries being returned. People saw the bigger picture and knew that other people might need this battery. Let me bring it back. So, we kind of estimated that we might get half back, and we saw plenty more back than what we thought.
There probably will be some, leakage, as they say. I just think that might be the price you have to pay. It happening at a neighborhood level where people kind of know the people and know where they live. I think that makes it a lot more likely. But we do definitely think that larger batteries is going to be key if you're trying to affect healthcare outcomes and mortality.
Thanks. Well, this brings up another question. Somebody has asked, how do you deal with potential liability issues around life-sustaining equipment? I guess what that means is you're supplying a battery to run somebody's oxygen concentrator or something of that nature during an outage, and now your equipment has become the key to their equipment continuing to function. Is there a legal issue or liability issue there that you need to address?
I think there probably is, and the answer is probably insurance. It also is sometimes easier for less formal community organizations to take on those risks than hospital institutions and others that have some expectation. So I think we got those questions early on about Lighthouse, and it was like, okay, if you're not comfortable with it, then don't be in the pilot, and plenty are, because this is just what they do anyway. They just do it without any electricity, and but as it becomes systematized, I think those will be increasingly real challenges that we need to think through and face. Ultimately, there'll probably be some kind of liability insurance that helps to address any concerns when it is the expectation that you're going to be providing this, so that the failure to do so might create some torque.
And
Sorry, go ahead, Jamie.
I was just going to say, on our end, whenever we deploy anything that's larger than kind of those portable small cell phone batteries, such as a trailer or like the small system that we showed. We have a equipment staging and use agreement that's basically a mutual release of liability that says if they damage the solar generator while they're using it, they're not responsible, you know, for anything. And if they shock themselves on it and they get injured with it, that footprint project is not liable for that, for injuries as well.
I just add that I think that liability question would really come up in a stronger way if there was a financial arrangement between the recipient or if this was a rental agreement and that's a completely different question, and it would be we do rent our equipment and that's a completely different agreement. If it's a temporary free lease or free rental, I think there's many ways to make this work. At the end of the day, everybody knows the risks of buying a generator and running that gasoline. And I think we just need to be honest about what levels of risk we're taking here, and by and large, deploying home, you know, this type of equipment into people for health and medical and critical needs is way safer. And I remember from working as a paramedic in Minneapolis, we used to use Goal Zero batteries to power the ventilator when we were transporting a patient from the 9th story of a hospital to the ambulance where there wasn't a plug. And so we would literally put the little Goal Zero battery that you can buy at REI on the patient's stretcher and plug the breathing, you know, the ventilator, the thing that's keeping this person's lungs chest rising, into that Goal Zero to get down the elevator before, and then plug it back in. So it's like, this has already happened. Like making the battery a little bit bigger is, you know what I mean? Like there's a couple issues, but this is not rocket science.
And I know we're coming to an end here, but I think it's worth noting that like we're starting on a larger scale, you're starting to see utilities being held accountable for not providing reliable electricity to folks in the event of a power outage, like what we've seen in California with the public safety shutoffs. So I would argue on the opposite end of things, where when we were first seeing battery storage programs come up, like in places like the Northeast and California, there would be hesitation to market the battery storage program to medically vulnerable individuals for this issue of like, oh, we don't want to be liable. But now you have the flip of the coin where it's actually like, are we actually in a better position as a utility to be offering these, since we're actually being held accountable now for loss of life due to infrastructure, massive infrastructure failure. So I think that it's a big question. There's a lot of hesitation around it. I agree with Will around renting something is different than getting it in an emergency scenario. But I think that you're starting to see the shift as utilities are being held accountable for, you know, really, if we can't rely on electricity, what can we rely on? It's not it shouldn't be a privilege, it's a right, right? So I think that's another way of looking at it.
Well, especially where there is a government sanctioned monopoly in the case of electric utilities. So we're at the end of our time. I thank you all very much. This was an excellent presentation. Thank you to everybody who participated, and I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. We do record these webinars, and the recordings are available on the CISA website along with the slides. So if anybody wants to review it or send a link to a friend to watch it or take a look at the slides, they will all be posted shortly. Samantha, do we have an upcoming webinar announcement?
We do. I just put it up on the screen. I think you're hosting this one too, Todd. Am I right?
I think I'm actually a co-presenter on this one. This is a project that CISA and Sandia have been working on together. We just recently published this report on best practices in state energy storage policy for decarbonization. That is what states are doing and should consider doing in terms of energy storage policy and regulatory work to support their decarbonization goals. And that's going to be coming up March 23rd. So hope you all can join us. Again, thanks to everybody. Excellent presentations, and we'll see you next time.